11, he opens up by defining faith, doesn't he? Now, faith is a substance of things hoped for, the what? Evidence of things not seen. There's two words there, substance and evidence. Folks, faith is not a blind leap in the dark. Faith is not believing in something that you truly do not know exists. I heard a gospel preacher define faith in that way, and that is not faith. Faith is based on substantive things. Faith is based upon evidence, isn't it? And is the Hebrew writer encouraging the readers to be faithful? Yes, because they are getting pressure to go back to what? Judaism. Now, folks, faith is fundamental, isn't it? Faith is something that you and I must have, we must possess, and we must possess it in abundance if we're going to stay faithful. And so he's encouraging his readers to faithfulness. And one of the ways he does that is to point them to examples of faith in times past. And he began with the fathers. What do we mean by that? The fathers. Yes, the patriarchs. And we made mention of the fact that he didn't start with who? He didn't start with Adam. Isn't that something? He started with Adam's son. Which one? Abel. Okay, the faithful one. But he did not start with Adam. I just find that interesting, okay? When I teach my How to Study the Bible class, and we're talking about the book of Genesis, I say that Genesis can be very easily outlined by 6 men. Okay? Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. 6 men. Okay? The writer here, he almost outlines the book of Genesis that way because that's talking about the days of patriarchy. Okay? But he includes 2 that I don't include. Okay? He starts with who? Abel. Then he talks about Enoch. Remember, Enoch was the first man what? Translated. Then he goes to Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Okay, so he has an outline almost identical to me. Okay, I thought that was pretty cool. I'm almost thinking like the Hebrew writer. Okay, I just left, I started out with the wrong dude and forgot one. But thought that was interesting. And we have made our way all the way down to Jacob, okay? And that's where we are. We had begun to talk about Jacob and how Jacob manifested his faith. And I find it interesting that Jacob is manifesting his faith in old age, isn't he? Does the Bible talk about a lot of young people who have faith? No? Some? Yeah, they do. Yeah. Do y'all even know what you're talking about? Okay. Who? David. David was a young man when he went out to fight Goliath. Daniel. Samuel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Mary, guys, as far as we know, Mary may have been a very young lady at the time that she was called to bear a son. Sometimes they married very early, 14, 15, 16 years of age. So she would have been a very young woman, possibly. Timothy, we kind of classify him in that youth group, don't we? So there's quite a few young people, but sometimes we need to focus on the elderly, don't we? True or false? Elderly give up their faith sometimes when they get old. Yeah. It gets a little bit harder, doesn't it? A little bit more difficult. And we're going to see that here a little bit with Jacob. And sometimes people just kind of quit, don't they? They're not as diligent. Yes, ma'am. Well, there's not much difference between the two. Maybe a little bit of mindset, but it's harder, okay, to get up. It's harder to be faithful. It's harder to sit through 2 hours of lessons. It's harder to come back. It's harder to drive. You don't feel good, and so you just kind of, I don't know, I guess complacent is a good word, but, they just kind of give up on their faithfulness, And what's amazing to me is you go talk to them and they don't act like they're too worried about it anymore, And that's what concerns me sometimes. Well, I'll give you the Jewish definition. Okay? The Jewish definition of an elder was 60 and over. Okay? Youth, under the age of 20. Middle age, 20 to 60. Elderly, 60 and beyond. So Paul refers to himself as Paul the Aged. So he's what? He's probably over 60 years old, okay? Because Paul was a Jew. He would kind of reckon things with Jewish time. Jesus, on the other hand, very young man, wasn't he? Okay, 33 years old or so. And so, I'm still a youth. Still in that middle-age stuff. I'm not old yet. Okay, now, anybody over 60? The aged. What's that? Methuselah? Oh, man. Let's don't even talk about Methuselah. Man. No, anybody want to live that long? Not me. All right, so here Jacob is in his old age. And Jacob has how many sons? 12 sons, doesn't he? Okay. There's one son that he hasn't seen very much growing up. Who is that? Joseph. Right, Joseph gets sold, and guys, it's about 22 or so years before Joseph and Jacob are reunited. Well, during the course of that time, Joseph has married, hasn't he? It's interesting that he has married an Egyptian. Okay, he has married an Egyptian, one of the priests of Egypt. He's married that individual's daughter, and how many sons does he have? 2. And Jacob includes those 2 sons in his blessing, doesn't he? And that's what this text is talking about, his blessing of these 2 sons. By faith, he blessed the 2 sons of Joseph. Who were those 2 sons? Anybody know? Who were the 2 sons of Jacob? 2 sons of Joseph that were blessed by Jacob? Ephraim and Manasseh. Who's the older? Manasseh is the older. Ephraim is the younger. But remember, if you're going to, the way they properly blessed, if there were 2 sons, then the way they properly blessed them was the older had the right hand placed upon them. The younger had the left hand placed upon them. Okay, because the older was supposed to get the better blessing, right? When Jacob went to bless these 2 sons, what did he do? He crossed his hands. Remember that? And it was prophetic, wasn't it? Okay? And by faith, he blessed these 2 sons. And when he did it, he crossed his hands. And Joseph even called attention to it, did he? No, Dad, that's the wrong thing. He says, no, I know what I'm doing. Okay, and Ephraim became the more powerful of the 2 tribes. Okay, who did these 2 sons, and I'm going to use a word accommodatively, okay, just for lack of better terminology, who did these 2 sons replace with regard to the tribes of Israel? Joseph was one. Who is the other? Because if you take Joseph out, that leaves 11, right? Add his 2 sons, that leaves what? That brings to 13. There's not 13 tribes, there's 12 tribes. So what's the other tribe that they replace? Levi. That's exactly right. Remember, Levi did not get any land in the land of Israel. Well, I said, for lack of a better term, accommodatively, these 2 sons took the place of Joseph and Levi. There were still 12 tribes, okay, and then the tribe of who? Levi. Okay, 12 tribes and then the tribe of Levi. So very, very interesting group of individuals. And eventually, Ephraim is going to become the name known for the totality of the 10 tribes when they split from one another. Okay, when you read the Scripture, oftentimes he'll talk about Ephraim is turned to his idols. Well, guess what that means? Not just the tribe of Ephraim. Guess what he's talking about? the totality of Israel. Okay, because that name became the kind of the, what do you call it, embracing term for all of the 10 tribes. So very prophetic in what he does. Now, there's one point that we didn't get to, and it's found in verse 21c, the last part. And it talks about Joseph doing this by faith. Look what it says. And worshiped, now listen to this, leaning upon the top of his staff. Wow. Leaning upon the top of his staff. Got it? First of all, he worshiped. Okay? Guys, even though he was old, even though he was nearing death, even though he was feeble, he did not do what? Yes, he didn't turn back. He didn't lose his faith. He didn't quit worshiping his God. Okay? And so here's a wonderful lesson for people who are elderly. Okay? Now notice how he had to do it. Leaning on his staff. I got crutches. I got a walker. I got a boot. I had to say it. I had to say it. He didn't get it off, and he's got to wear it 2 more weeks. Perfect for tonight. Leaning on his boot. Pray that he gets it off in 2 weeks. But, you know, when we get older, we have to have things help us, don't we, in order to make it through the day. And here we find a patriarch that needs assistance. He's leaning on his staff. But even though he's frail, even though he needs a staff to help him walk, he's still what? He's still worshiping God. And the verse begins, by faith, folks. We got Frank here, don't we? 92. What's he doing? Worshiping his God, isn't he? You see? Don't let old age give you an excuse not to be faithful. Okay? I've heard a lot of elderly people who are faithful and you know, they're older. They kind of take this attitude. I can hurt at home or I can hurt at church. Right? And so sometimes they just get up, get dressed, and come on anyway, don't they? And that's a good attitude. And I know sometimes it's just impossible, and God does too, but Jacob's a wonderful example for elderly individuals in old age. All right? Now, he does not skip, guess who? Joseph. Okay, he does not skip Joseph. In fact, 14 chapters of Genesis are devoted to the life of Joseph. Okay? Just amazing. Now, one of the chapters is really about Tamar and doesn't talk about Joseph, but 14 chapters revolve around the life of Joseph. And notice how he starts again. By faith, Joseph, when he died. Uh-oh. How often do we die? One time. And as it is appointed unto man once to die, and after this, the judgment. Folks, we be faithful unto death. What's that mean? Unto death. Right up to the very moment that death takes you, be faithful. Okay? And Joseph is an individual who manifests that kind of faith. Okay? Right up to the very point of death. Where did Joseph live most of his life? Egypt. Where did Joseph die? In Egypt. Okay. Where was the promised land? Canaan. Right? Folks, that's a few 100 miles from Egypt. All right? And I just find it interesting that Joseph, in his mind, wanted one thing. And you know what that was? I want to go back home to Canaan. Right? Isn't that amazing? That he wants to go back. He understands. You see, he understood the promise of God. Abraham understood it. Isaac understood it. Jacob understood it. Joseph understood it. Canaan is going to be our what? Our home. Even though none of those men ever owned any of it. It's amazing, isn't it? It's just amazing. But notice what he says. He talks about the exit from Egypt. Made mention of the departing of the children of Israel. In Joseph's mind, he knew what? There's going to come a day when God takes us out of Egypt and takes us back to the Promised Land. Why did he think that? Why did he think that? Faith? Give me more than that, huh? Yes, folks, God promised it. Right? God promised Abraham, I'm going to give you this land. He even let him stand on a mountain and look it over. And he said, I'm going to give you this land. And now, the totality of the nation of Israel is where? In Egypt. And Joseph is almost on his deathbed. He's about to pass from this life. Exodus 1:8 says this, Now there arose up a new king, which knew not Joseph. Remember, Joseph was pretty powerful in Egypt, was he not? Second in command, right? Second to Pharaoh. And Joseph wielded an unbelievable power. In fact, Pharaoh gave him all power, didn't he? The only one that wasn't subject to Joseph was Pharaoh himself. What power that is, folks. Did he do a wonderful work in the nation of Egypt? Yeah. He saved that nation from famine, did he not? Now guys, when leaders are great and they save their people from horrible times, they're known for a while, right? But guess what happens to all leaders? They die, and the memory of that person fades. I don't care how great he is, the memory fades, doesn't it? Now there arose up a new king, which knew not Joseph. You see, as long as the kings knew Joseph, they were friendly to who? To the nation of Israel. But when one finally rose up that didn't know Joseph, didn't have much connection to Joseph, could care less about Joseph, well then guess what? They're no longer my friends. Now they look as though they pose what? A threat to us. Now the reason I bring all this up is this. Time is passing. Okay? Time is passing. And the children of Israel are going to be in the land of Egypt for a long time. Okay? After Joseph dies, they're going to be in Egypt for a long time. And yet Joseph said what? Notice what the text says. Made mention of the departing of the children of Israel. Somebody turn over to Exodus 50, verse 24. Exodus 50, verse 24, and just read that to us. I'm sorry, Genesis. Who's got it? 50, verse 24.
And Joseph said to his brother, I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob.
You hear that? Folks, that's faith. That's faith. God made a promise. It's going to be hundreds of years before this promise comes to pass. And yet Joseph said what? God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land into the land that he swore unto Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I don't care how long it's been since God made a promise. That promise is true. And Joseph recognized that and believed that. Okay, Larry?
Didn't he make a promise that they would not leave his bones in Egypt?
Well, we hadn't gotten there yet. Slow down. Slow down. First thing you got to do is what? Get them out of Egypt. Doesn't he? See, the reason that, the very reason about the bringing out the bones, first of all, is because he knew they would what? They knew they would leave. Now, guys, what I'm trying to impress upon you is we just read this stuff sometimes and we don't understand. Is 400 years a long time? This nation has not even been in existence for 400 years. It's going to be years before this promise comes to pass. And Joseph believed it with every fiber of his being. God will visit you. You see, this is the kind of faith we have to have. Okay? We get down, we get discouraged, we cry, we mope around, we quit working, quit being faithful. Guys, you can't do that. You got to do what? You got to trust God. And Joseph trusted his God. And, here you go, Larry, gave commandment concerning his bones. Genesis 50, verse 25. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from thence. Man. And guys, again, he's manifesting faith, isn't he? He is so sure of it that he makes them make an oath to him, saying, look guys, when you leave, grab my bones. Right? Don't leave here without me. Now, let me ask you this. Is it going to take them a while to get to Canaan? How many years? 40 years they're toting bones. Have you ever thought about that? 40 years the bones of Joseph was somewhere among the children of Israel as they made their way through the wilderness. That's true. It also took about 7 years to conquer the land of Canaan before everything was finally set up and everything. 7 years of conquering, 7 years of actually going in and dividing up the land and getting it where it needs to be. So we're talking about 50 years or so that they're just got these bones, right? And carrying them around with them. See, you hadn't even thought about that, have you? Okay? I don't know about you. I don't want to carry around bones all the time. Okay? I've already told Kathleen, if I cremate her, I'm not toting her around. Thing going in the ground somewhere. Listen to Exodus 13:19. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had straitly sworn by the children of Israel, saying, God will visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones away hence with you. So Moses honored the request of Joseph. Isn't that something? Folks, Joseph and Moses are years apart. Okay? And yet, Moses honors the request. Can you imagine having to pass that story down? Joseph said, take the bones. Joseph said, take the bones. Joseph said, take the bones. It's time to leave. And guess what? Joseph said, take the bones. So the bones they go get, and off they go. Joshua 24:32. And the bones of Joseph with the children of Israel brought up out of Egypt, buried they in Shechem, in a parcel of ground which Jacob bought of the sons of Hamor, the brother of Shechem, for 100 pieces of silver. And it became the inheritance of the children of Joseph. Man. Joseph had faith. And guess what? The promise of God came to pass. Got it? Guys, our Lord said He's coming again. Did He not? Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go and prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. Has it been a long time since that promise has been made? Yeah, just a couple of thousand years. Now, if I told you I was going to cut your grass and I didn't cut it for 2,000 years, guess what you'd think? You think I'm not cutting your grass, wouldn't you? Guys, it doesn't matter how long it is. Not with God. Peter says that a day is with the Lord is what? 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. Some people think that that's the way God thinks about time. Okay? Get that out of your mind. That's not what Peter's saying. Okay? 1,000 years a day, days, that's not what Peter's saying. Peter's saying this. Peter's saying it doesn't matter whether it's a day or 1,000 years. There's no difference in the mind of God. My promise will come to fruition. Okay? A day, that's as 1,000 years. 1,000 years, that's as a day. It doesn't matter whether it's a day or 1,000 years, God will what? He'll keep His promise. He's coming, folks. And you and I better be ready, hadn't we? Better be ready. Was Joseph ready? He was ready. Ready to be toted back to the land of Canaan long before it transpired. Wow, man. If that doesn't give you chills, something wrong with you. Chill bumps. Okay? Now, we're about to enter into the next section. Okay? Hebrews 11:23 through 31. And this entire section deals with one person, and I refer to him as the founder. The founder of the Jewish religion. Who would that be? Moses. The Bible says in John 1:17, now the law was given by Moses. Okay? Moses is the founder of the Jewish religion. Now, as far as being the father of the Jewish religion, who do they count as the father? Abraham's the father, but Moses is the founder because he gave the what? He gave the law. You can't have a nation without a what? Without a law. Okay? Can't have a nation without a law. And so he begins in verse 23. And I've entitled it this way. Faith rescued Moses. Now notice how it begins. By faith, Moses. I just find that's interesting. Because the reality is this. This faith that we're about to talk about has nothing to do with Moses. Not this first faith. Okay? But he starts off by faith, Moses. You want to know why he starts that way? We'll get to it in a minute. Okay? By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents. Notice he begins with the concealment, doesn't he? 3 months they hide this little baby. Notice he begins by the trait. What's the trait? By faith. Every time. Every time he introduces a new person, it's always by what? By faith. What's faith? Give me some definitions of faith. Don't quote Hebrews 11:1. What's faith? Trust. Believing in what's unseen. What, Confidence. Good. Yeah, you're reading off my paper now? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I've put down 3 or 4 words there, guys. Faith, confidence, trust, assurance. That's what faith is, right? Joseph was sure God was going to visit the children of Israel. Okay? By faith, something transpires. But again, notice this is not the faith of Moses, but it was a faith that would impact who? Moses. Guys, I put a lesson here, and I want you to really listen to it. Grab hold of it. Listen to what it says. Our faith can play a very important part in the life of someone else. Got that? You want to know why Moses lived to be the leader of the children of Israel? Because of the faith of his parents. You know that? Isn't that something? Our faith can have a huge impact on the life of another person. Now, I wanted to keep it positive, so I didn't put the negative. But the negative is just as true. Our lack of faith can have an impact on the life of another. Can it? Absolutely. But let's keep it positive, right? Because he kept it positive here, didn't he? So just remember, every day you're living a life. I want to live a life of faith. Why? Because one reason is because I want to positively impact the lives of others. And that's what our faith does if we live correctly. And that's what happened on this occasion. Notice the time when he was born. Moses was born in the land of Egypt. It was during a period of rigorous bondage, wasn't it? Rigorous bondage, folks. Notice that Pharaoh had also issued a decree that who should be killed? All the sons of the Israelites. He first issued the decree to whom? The midwives, didn't he? And the midwives, they saw the Israelite women and how strong they were and how vigorous they were, and they were scared and refused to do it. So guess what he does? He issues the command to anybody in Israel. Anybody in Egypt. Okay? And especially his who? His soldiers would go in and take charge of that. So just think of the period of time in which he's born, right? He's in a foreign land, right? Under a wicked king who's got the nation in rigorous bondage, and he's under threat of death the very moment he's born into the world. Wow. It's not a good time to be born. You know it? But notice the testimony was hid 3 months of his parents. I put on there, a small child is difficult to hide. Right? I'm hungry. I cry. I got a dirty diaper. I cry. I'm sick. I cry. Daddy don't hold me right. I cry for Mommy. Right? He was just a regular, average baby like all other babies, folks. Now notice this next one. The reasons they may have hid him. Regular visits by Pharaoh's soldiers. It's kind of scary, isn't it? Regular visits by Pharaoh's soldiers. Notice this. Spies placed among the Israelites. Man. Could he have done that? Yeah. Hey, you need to check out Jochebed. She just had a baby the other day. Right? May have even paid some of the Israelites to do it. To be spies. How about the next one? Caregivers were required to report any new births. Were there some births that may have been difficult in that day? Oh, yes. There may have been a lot of bleeding. There may have been complications with the umbilical cord. There could have been all kinds of problems that needed a caregiver in order to help the birth of the child. Well, maybe the caregiver's been ordered by Pharaoh to what? You report. Any birth that you help out in Israel, got to be reported. Wow. How about this one? Jealous Israelites who lost a son to the Egyptians. Right? 2 ladies pregnant. One gives birth on Wednesday. Her child immediately gets snatched from her and thrown into the river by the Egyptians. The next lady's baby is born on Friday. She gets to keep him Saturday. She gets to keep him Sunday. She gets to keep him Monday. The other lady, jealous. Why do you get to keep your kid and I don't get to keep my kid? Does jealousy cause you to do some crazy things? We've already seen that with who? Saul. Folks, jealousy will cause you to do a lot of things. And so the woman may run up to one of the soldiers. You need to check that house. They got a baby in there. If I lost my baby, you need to lose yours. Who knows? So guess what they had to do? They had to hide this baby. And they did that 3 months. Now here's what's interesting, okay? We've seen the concealment. They hid the child. But the cause of the hiding. The text says this, because they saw he was a proper child. So I looked up the word proper. Strong says it means handsome. It's translated one other way in the King James Version, and that's fair. Thayer says that it means elegant of body, comely, fair. Vine says it is, well, Vine doesn't say this, I put this first note in there. It's found underneath the definition of the word beautiful. Okay, it's the second word underneath beautiful in Vine's. Okay? Vine defines it as goodly, fair. Now, the birth of Moses and what he looked like, and as mentioned 2 other times in the Bible. Okay? One of them is Exodus 2 verse 2. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. Acts 7:20 says this, in the time Moses was born and was exceeding fair and nourished up in his father's house 3 months. So we have what? He was proper, goodly, and fair. Okay? I looked up that little word goodly though, and look what it says. Good. Meaning looks, demeanor, behavior. Brown Driver and Briggs says good, pleasant, becoming, happy, excellence of its kind. What was it about Moses? The text says, because they saw he was a proper child. There was something, this couple, when they saw this baby, there was something in that baby that they saw that caused them to think what? God's going to use this baby. There's something special, there's something unique, there's something different about this child. We cannot let this baby die. And so they hid him 3 months. Now folks, think about this. After the 3-month period, they were so convinced that there was something special about him that they took that child and put him right into the hands of God. Didn't they? I don't know about you. It'd be hard for me to put a 3-month-old in a little ark of bulrushes at the edge of the Nile River. There you go. Guess what you just did? You just put that baby into the hands of the Almighty God by faith, didn't you? But it was because they saw something in the child. I would love now to have seen Moses when he was born. Wouldn't you? Something different. Something unique. Now, here's what's interesting. The very moment that Pharaoh's daughter saw him, she knew what? This is one of the Hebrews' babies. She knew it. This is one of the Hebrews' babies. So he still looked like a what? A little Hebrew baby. Right? A little Jewish baby. But there was something that his parents saw in him that was so unique that they saved him. Man. Now notice this next part, the courage. And they were not afraid of the king's commandment. And they were not afraid of the king's commandment. Now, here's my thoughts on it, okay? I know the king's commandment said what? Child is born, that child is to be killed. Was there anything else that the king had legislated? If you find one of those Hebrews hiding one of those babies, guess what? The parents now are under threat of death, aren't they? I mean, the Bible makes a big deal that they did this by faith and that they did it with courage, right? They were not afraid of what the king would do to them. I'm hiding this child. I'm not going to let him die. He will not get cast into the river. I don't care what Pharaoh says. That's courage, folks. That's courage. I put this lesson down. here we find a time when there is a higher law that had to be obeyed rather than the laws of man. You know that? And sometimes that happens, doesn't it? You know, when the Hebrews have a baby, give the baby up. Baby has to be killed. You cannot allow that baby to live. Don't you dare try to hide that baby. If you hide that baby and we find out, your life is subject to be taken. Or you might be placed in prison yourself. And yet, guess what? I don't care what the king's command is. I want this child to what? I want this child to live. Will we ever come to a point in our history that we're living in wherein we have to defy the laws of the land to do what God has authorized? That could come. That could come. There was a test of that a few years back where a local government was requesting all sermons be sent in each Sunday before they were preached. Because if they were going to preach on homosexuality, guess what? They didn't want them doing it. So we're going to survey your lessons to see what you say. Because see, a lesson may just have a point in it, right? One or two sentences about that particular subject. Just think about that. Every lesson has to be sent into the local government and approved before it can be preached. And if they don't approve it, or don't approve a section of it, then guess what? You're supposed to throw it out. Man, talking about test the faith of preachers. I'll test the faith of preachers right there.